Well, if Donald Trump gets dementia, how will we know? Donald Trump's mental decline, which is more and more obvious, started from such a low level of mental processing power that it's hard to track his decline. It's from low to lower. And then there are days like today when Donald Trump asks himself out loud in public if he is allowed to appoint himself chair of the Federal Reserve. Now, it may be tiresome to hear, but we must not grow weary of making the point that no other president was ever capable of saying anything as stupid or as indicative of dementia as that. Am I allowed to appoint myself chair of the Federal Reserve? And we must not grow weary of reminding ourselves what the White House press corps would have done if Joe Biden ever said anything like that, and how big the headlines would be in the next day's print editions of the New York Times and the Washington Post and every newspaper in the country. Because if we grow weary of making the point of how singularly stupid and possibly clinically demented Donald Trump's statements are, then we will become part of the normalization process of those statements, which most of the American news media has unwittingly participated in. And 14-year-olds in this country will think it's perfectly normal for a president to say those things. And on a day when the president of the United States is reportedly in a meeting in the Situation Room where he is trying to decide how much to support or fully join a war that he opposed a week ago, it must be reported as part of that very same story that the person who is supposed to be in charge in that Situation Room meeting, the person who is supposed to be the decider in chief, as George W. Bush put it, in that meeting doesn't know if he can appoint himself chair of the Federal Reserve, and some of the highest ranking people in that room with that president also don't know the answer to that question. Pete Hegseth has no idea if Donald Trump can appoint himself chair of the Federal Reserve. Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have no idea that Donald Trump doesn't even have the legal power to fire the chair of the Federal Reserve, and he also doesn't have the power to unilaterally replace the chair of the Federal Reserve because it requires a confirmation vote by the United States Senate. That's how small the brain is that is sitting at the head of the table in the Situation Room deciding just how much the United States of America should participate in the war between Israel and Iran, that Donald Trump all but promised his voters could not possibly occur on his watch. In fact, that's exactly what he promised. Donald Trump spent his entire presidential campaign saying Vladimir Putin would not have dared to launch a full-scale war against Ukraine if Donald Trump had been president. Donald Trump spent his entire presidential campaign claiming that Hamas would not have dared to attack Israel on October 7th, 2023. Donald Trump promised no wars. If he got elected president, Donald Trump promised he would solve and end Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. On the first day of his presidency, Donald Trump promised he would bring peace to the Middle East, the entire region. On the first day of his presidency, and then once in the White House, Donald Trump began promising White Lotus-style beach resorts in Gaza. And if that is not a sign of dementia in a 79-year-old man, then it is at minimum proof that Donald Trump has no idea what he's talking about whenever he talks. If Donald Trump gets dementia, how will we know? I asked that question on Twitter a week before Donald Trump's first inauguration as president. I asked that question before a group of mental health professionals got together to write a book about what they perceived as Donald Trump's mental health deficiencies under the title, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 37 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. And so, with the mental weakness of Donald Trump in mind, listen to his answer today. When asked if he, quote, is moving closer to striking Iranian nuclear facilities, where's your mindset on that? That was the question. Remember that was the question. And remember, as you listen to this reply, what a standard presidential reply would be to a question like that. No matter whether the president had already privately made a decision or not, a president would say things like all options are on the table in order to convey a variety of messages to the parties to the conflict, but still not turn over cards. A president could also say definitively, we have no intention of launching any strikes. That is exactly what Donald Trump's Secretary of State said when this war began. Marco Rubio, who has absolutely no authority because he's not a real Secretary of State, he's just Donald Trump's Secretary of State. Marco Rubio issued this written statement a full 6 days ago. Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for its self-defense. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. 6 days ago. That was 6 days ago. Could not be more clear. And could not be more meaningless because that's Donald Trump's Secretary of State speaking. And today, when asked about striking Iran's nuclear facilities, Donald Trump said this.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
That obviously includes Donald Trump. That sounds like a person who has no idea what he's going to do. And it sounds like a person who may not be in control of what he does. It sounds like a person who may unknowingly have surrendered control to a persuasion system that has been feeding and corroding what's left of his brain for the entire 21st century. A persuasion system operated by the Australian-turned-American citizen billionaire Rupert Murdoch, who, according to one of Rupert Murdoch's paid propagandists, preys on the weak minds of elderly Fox viewers.
What they're doing is what they always do, which is just turning up the propaganda hose to full blast and just trying to, knock elderly Fox viewers off their feet and make them submit.
That is Tucker Carlson's explanation for what Rupert Murdoch's Fox propaganda channel is doing to elderly viewers like 79-year-old Donald Trump, to make them submit to agreeing with sending the American military into a war with Iran. The elderly 79-year-old Fox viewer living in the White House has a mind that is at least as vulnerable to Rupert Murdoch's persuasion as anyone else glued to the Fox propaganda channel. The New York Times has this account of how the Fox channel did not just staff Donald Trump's administration and cabinet, but also functions as a highly influential team of advisors to Donald Trump, a team of TV advisors that may very well be more influential than the Trump cabinet. The Times reports Mr. Trump joined his national security team in the White House Situation Room on Thursday evening as the first wave of strikes was unfolding and was still keeping his options open. Earlier that day, he was telling advisors and allies that he still wanted to get a deal with Iran. But as the night wore on and the Israelis landed a spectacular series of precision strikes against Iranian military leaders and strategic sites, Mr. Trump began to change his mind about his public posture. When he woke on Friday morning, his favorite TV channel, Fox News, was broadcasting wall-to-wall imagery of what it was portraying as Israel's military genius, and Mr. Trump could not resist claiming some credit for himself. In phone calls with reporters, Mr. Trump began hinting that he had played a bigger behind-the-scenes role in the war than people realized. Privately, he told some confidants that he was now leaning toward a more serious escalation, going along with Israel's earlier request that the United States deliver powerful bunker-busting bombs to destroy Iran's nuclear facility at Fordo. Donald Trump is now failing at trying to manage a huge argument that has divided America's most prominent Trump supporters. Tucker Carlson, who supported George W. Bush's war in Iraq, now opposes American involvement in the newest war in the Middle East and managed to easily humiliate Texas Senator Rafael Cruz by asking him the question, how many people live in Iran? Senator Cruz was stumped. Senator Cruz, who favors a full USA versus Iraq style war in Iran, had no idea how many people live in Iran. That video has gone viral of one Trump-worshipping ignoramus arguing with an even more ignorant Trump worshiper. And Donald Trump's response has been to insult Tucker Carlson for getting fired by Fox after evidence in a defamation lawsuit that Fox lost revealed text messages of Tucker Carlson saying how much he really hates Donald Trump. When Tucker Carlson realized he couldn't make a living after Fox without publicly worshiping Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson fully submitted to that worship, and Donald Trump welcomed Tucker Carlson back into the fold, which is always, with Donald Trump, as Elon Musk has found out, a temporary welcome. No president has ever changed the subject as wildly and uncontrollably as Donald Trump. Donald Trump deliberately changed the subject from Elon Musk accusing him of being named in the investigative files of the criminal pedophilia investigation of Donald Trump's friend Jeffrey Epstein by sending federal troops into Los Angeles. Donald Trump commandeered the California National Guard in order to distract from Elon Musk saying Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and to distract from Elon Musk attacking Donald Trump's budget bill for increasing the national debt by a greater amount than any piece of federal legislation ever has. A federal judge ruled that Donald Trump broke the law by commandeering the California National Guard. But that's just how far Donald Trump was willing to go to change the subject from the Epstein files and his bit in his budget bill, which tonight has a new estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office saying it will actually increase the national debt even more than they originally projected, now that they have done what Republicans wanted them to do and taken into consideration the dynamics of how the bill will interact with other government action and the rest of the economy. That was an example of Donald Trump deliberately changing the subject, but he also uncontrollably changes the subject by randomly blurting out madness. But none of that seems to be distracting from the public perception of just how much Donald Trump has failed at what voters said was the most important proposition in his candidacy for president the last time, which was his ability to control inflation. 61% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of inflation and the cost of living. 60% disapprove of Donald Trump's tariffs and trade policy, and 79% say their economic situation is the same or worse as it was 1 year ago. Donald Trump promised voters the world. Donald Trump promised voters world peace. And Donald Trump promised voters that the leading economy in the world would soar just by electing him president, and inflation would drop dramatically on the first day just by electing him president. And it was all a lie by someone who is so stupid that he thought, or claimed that he thought, the tariffs imposed by the United States are paid by other countries. Americans now know who pays those tariffs. Donald Trump's 10-year lie about tariffs is all over. Americans know that Trump tariffs are Trump sales taxes imposed on Americans, paid by Americans only, on anything imported into this country like coffee and bananas and cars and baseball gloves. And because Donald Trump's tariffs have crashed the stock market multiple times and made economic planning for business and the Federal Reserve more challenging than ever, Donald Trump thinks that he can blame inflation and everything that voters fear about his economic policies on the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who Donald Trump appointed and who Joe Biden reappointed, and who is a Republican. And so once again, Donald Trump attacked Republican Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
I call him Too Late Powell because he's always too late. I mean, if you look at him, every time I did this, I was right 100%. He was wrong. Maybe I should go to the Fed. Am I allowed to appoint myself, Doug? I don't know. Am I allowed to appoint myself at the Fed? I'd do a much better job.
That's today. That's his attack today. Now, he never said that in his first term as president. Am I allowed to appoint myself? He was crazy, but he wasn't that crazy. He was stupid, but he wasn't that stupid. And then just to prove how he has no grasp of human relations, no grasp of how to persuade someone who you have no control over to do what you want that person to do. The stupidest man speaking into a microphone in Washington today said more about Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve. And because I know Donald Trump's voice dulls the brain of any healthy person trying to make sense of the English language, I am going to read Donald Trump's words exactly as he spoke them, without submitting you to the mind-dulling, mind-fogging experience of the sound of those words coming from Donald Trump's voice. Because in a way, all of the words coming from Donald Trump's voice all the time all sound the same and are just a jumble to our ears so often that we don't really take in each one of them. And sometimes to clearly hear Donald Trump's cognitive confusion at work, you just need to hear the words spoken by someone else, anyone else. So here's what Donald Trump said about Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Now we have a man that just refuses to lower the Fed rate, just refuses to. And he's not a smart person. I don't think he's even that political. I think he hates me. But that's okay. You know, he should. I call him every name in the book, trying to get him to do something. I've been nice to him. I do it always. I don't know how to sell. I've been so nice to him. Fellas, you wouldn't believe. Let's have dinner. Too late. I call him. Too late. Come on. Too late. Let's have dinner. I do it every way in the book. I'm nasty. I'm nice. Nothing works. He's like a stupid person. That's what he said. That's what he said about how he tries to persuade someone who he has no control over to try to do something that he wants him to do. Calls him a stupid person publicly, says he's nasty to him, says he's nice to him, just describes a flow of interpersonal madness that anyone on the other end of that madness would have to ignore just for their own sanity. We must never lose our capacity to be shocked by the sheer stupidity and rank ignorance of Donald Trump. And he gave us an example of that today in the Oval Office that I highlight here right now for historians to find 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when they are trying to describe just how stupid and ignorant Donald Trump was, especially how stupid and ignorant Donald Trump was while speaking in the Oval Office. This is one we can really hope future historians do not miss.
A lot of wars there was no reason for. You look right up there, I don't know, see the Declaration of Independence, and I say, I wonder if the Civil War, it always seemed to me maybe that could have been solved without losing 600,000 plus people.
History will find that there was a president of the United States who did not know that the Declaration of Independence was written and signed 85 years before the Civil War. You look right up there, I don't know, see the Declaration of Independence, and I say, I wonder if the Civil War always seemed to me, maybe that could have been solved without losing 600,000 plus people. That's what he said. So he looks at the Declaration of Independence on the wall, and then he thinks that the Declaration of Independence was the product of the Civil War. We've always known that Donald Trump could not possibly pass a high school AP history course. We've always known that Donald Trump couldn't pass any test in any high school history course. But now we know that he couldn't possibly have passed any history test in my third grade at St. Brendan's Elementary School in Boston, in Dorchester. We knew that order of history, what came first, in the third grade. Declaration of Independence first, Revolutionary War second, Civil War a distant third to those events. There are children in elementary school in America tonight who are laughing at that video that they just saw right now, especially kids on the West Coast where this show is airing early enough for them to see it. The psychiatrists promised us in the first year of the first Trump presidency that there was only one direction that his mental health could go. And every day, Donald Trump proves them right.